Hey there, welcome to the Nailed It podcast with Danikka and Erin, brought to you by Author's Own Publishing.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Nailed It podcast with Danikka and Erin. Today, we're getting meaty. It is the first in our problematic authors series, and we are starting out with probably the easiest, honestly. We're starting with J.K. Rowling. However, I don't actually know how to say it properly. Does it matter?
I don't.
You all know who we're talking about.
Yeah, we don't need to. JKR.
Yeah, JKR.
The now infamous rather than famous.
Yeah.
Depending on who you talk to. But we just want to put a disclaimer at the start that in our usual episode fashion, this is going to be a bit rambly, a bit unstructured, but we do have sources and everything linked in the blog attached to this podcast episode where we put the transcript and everything. That is always linked in our show notes. So you can visit that and find all of the amazing, really structured, really well researched breakdowns.
Outstanding, yeah.
Done by multiple queer and POC people, as well as all of the mainstream media sources that we found too. They will all be linked in the blog in the show notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we just want to put that out there because, as you know, we do tend to go on tangents. So just to make sure that you can go and verify all of the things that we chat about, because we are not going to remember where we saw what, but it will be there.
Yeah.
Because basically this has just become a whole big thing, and when we look at the timeline, it very first kind of began as a downhill slide in 2018 for JK.
Yeah.
So we've kind of decided to break this episode down into 3 chapters.
And it's the first time we've ever done this kind of planning, because it did become a bit of a beast when we were looking at the content of this episode.
Yeah, we were really worried that we would just ramble for so long that we'd end up with some kind of 3-part episode that had no sense.
Yeah.
So this may be a longer episode. I'm not sure. We're not really sure what's going to happen. But we have 3 chapters that we want to address. So we've got the intro, which is what we're doing now. But then we have chapter 1, which is the creation of J.K. Rowling, the legend. Because I think that if we look at her rise to fame and Harry Potter's rise to fame and everything that kind of went into that, not just why people loved it, but also the landscape.
Well, the story around her as an author as well.
The story around her as an author, the story around like the landscape in publishing and the media and the internet, that kind of all came together to create what it is now. I think that helps to then see how everything that people are now pointing out as problematic was kind of missed at the time by a lot of us, but then also not missed by others.
Yes.
And then we have chapter 2, which is then where we dig into where really the fall of Rowling, or the not fall, depending on who you're talking to and how you look at it. But basically when she outs herself as the bigot that she is.
Yeah.
And then the 3rd chapter is where we will go into the consequences of continuing to support her, because really like that is what we're looking at with this problematic authors series, and that's why we started the series with the what it means to separate the art from the artist episode. So if you haven't heard that episode yet, we encourage you to go back and listen to that one, because it is in our episode list and it does cover a lot of what has motivated us to begin this series, because it helped us kind of carve out our understanding a lot as well of what this means. And yeah, our intention is not to tell anyone what to think or how to read or anything like that, but it's just to give you a bigger picture of why people are asking you to be more critical about the authors that you read.
Well, and I think because when I've mentioned it to people outside of bookish spaces, and I understand that like most of you here will probably be within bookish spaces, but a lot of people don't quite realise maybe the like extent of it.
Yeah.
And maybe we didn't even, until we started doing our sort of proper research, I wasn't aware of maybe, well, not when it started, certainly. Like I remember when things started going, in my opinion, downhill. But I don't think I understood sort of how outspoken, how the word is eluding me, but how dedicated she is to the book.
Yeah. And I think it also just, like as we talk about in the separating the art from the artist episode, about like people talking about, it's not about just, you know, reading different opinions and having an open mind and things like that. It's about putting your money where your mouth is, and the difference between reading authors who are dead and reading it from their perspective versus authors who are still alive and actively using money to hurt people.
Yeah. But that's chapter 3.
It's chapter 3. So anyway, we're going to begin with a brief timeline. And I do mean very brief because honestly, it's quite a timeline. But we will start with, she began publishing the Harry Potter books. The first one, I believe, came out in 1997. Yeah, Philosopher's Stone in the UK and elsewhere, and the Sorcerer's Stone in the US. And really, it became quite big. And then we kind of all grew up in that era, I suppose, or were, you know, already adults at that time. And so we saw
Me.
how quickly...
Not you.
how quickly it became a thing. So... yeah, it became a bestseller, it got movie deals, you know, the fandoms exploded, fan fiction, and it just, from 1997 right through until I believe we found that the last movie was made in 2014.
I think it was released. That was when it was released. Maybe it was
Yeah.
2011. But I don't know, like, was that first book immediately, like, gangbusters?
It did go quite big quite quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because part of like and I mean this is chapter 1, but like part of the legend of her is how much she had to query for so long and face so many rejections. So she was a bit older when she got that success, and then it did succeed because the publisher took the bet on her, and then it did do really well.
Yeah.
It did get quite big quite quickly.
Yeah, okay.
And so then I remember we were talking about it when we were prepping for the episode. It was a good 8 to 10 years nearly between when I think it was about 8 years between when the last movie came out and when JK started to reveal how problematic she was. Really clearly.
Yeah, really publicly. But that's specifically with Harry Potter, though. Like, she was publishing under her pseudonym in between them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and we're going to focus on Harry Potter because that is the, I guess, fandom, the story that people are attached to and struggling to, or that I suppose is still continuing to be given to kids as they grow up. It's like a coming of age. It's like a rite of passage to read Harry Potter as you're growing up. So that's why we're kind of focusing on that. But in 2018 was the downhill slide kind of began to then what we now see as the culmination of the timeline in 2025, when the direct contribution of JK's funding resulted in the passing of the definition of woman in the UK relating to biological sex.
Yeah.
And we can go into more about why that's problematic and why we should care about any of that in chapter 3, and also probably a bit in chapter 2. Because I do also realize that I think a lot of the time, because how she's problematic, because she's made herself this champion of hating on trans women in particular, they're such a small group of people. I think a lot of people tend to be like, oh, well, it doesn't affect me, so why does it matter? Like, it's not a big thing. Like, I think they want to know why they should care.
Yeah. But also I think maybe you would assume that trans women specifically, because she doesn't seem to reference trans men at all, you would assume that trans women are like a larger proportion of the population than they are.
Yes, exactly.
But I think we worked out that trans people, both men and women, and including non-binary, were at most 1% of most populations, and more likely between 0.5 and 1% of the population, which is like...
yeah, 0.05. Yeah.
Oh, 0.05. Not 0.5.
So anyway, with that brief timeline, because there will be more detailed breakdowns in any of the links that you can click on in the blog, because we did take notes, but we honestly just felt like we would have been spending half the episode reading out things to you and things like that. And there will be things that we want to read out to you, but honestly, we just wanted to start to jump in to talk about the legend of JK and why she's so important, was so important a figure, not just as Harry Potter, the books in itself, but J.K. Rowling herself as the author, as an inspiration to so many authors. Because, you know, authors are our audience mainly, authors and booksellers and readers as well, because she herself was a legend as well as the books. Like, yes, the books were big, but she also became very famous in her own right, and she had the reputation of being quite left-leaning.
Yeah.
was supportive of domestic violence charities, of immigration charities and not-for-profits. And she became this kind of symbol of the underdog in publishing.
100%.
You often see her kind of in that roundup of people. It's like, oh, you can reach success at any age. And then they list, how many rejections she got before Harry Potter was picked up. And that's where I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the landscape of publishing when Harry Potter became to be a thing. Because I think a lot of people, because we talk about traditional publishing, and we have talked about it on the podcast before, we talk about how in traditional publishing it is very much a waiting game of waiting for rejection after rejection after rejection before you get approval. And I think if we look at the context of JK in particular, at the time when she was pitching for Harry Potter, it would have also been particularly difficult because middle grade and YA fiction as a genre was not considered very profitable in publishing. It was considered pulp fiction, something you throw away. Kind of the last generation of big YA or middle grade kind of authors had been, Enid Blyton and Roald Dahl.
Which seems wild now with how big it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's such a massive chunk of the audience.
Yeah. So, before that, it was like they weren't considered to be profitable books to invest in. They were very much just like kind of throwaway. And so that was why she was having so much problems with getting picked up. It wasn't that necessarily Harry Potter wasn't good. It was that it wasn't what publishers were looking for at that time, because that is what goes into traditional publishers' decisions in picking up authors. Yeah. I feel like there's this kind of narrative about your writing has to be amazing, and sometimes it's not necessarily just about the writing being amazing. It's about what publishers are looking for at the time. Like at the moment, there's the big push for the romantasy. There's the big push for, that fourth wing type book, and so that's what they're pushing.
And I feel like they can make money out of, and what they're able to sell would almost be more important than the quality of your writing. Like, yes, that is still important, that if you are querying, then yes, you need to have as polished a manuscript as you can. But if you're getting rejections, it's not going to be about your writing, really.
No. Sometimes it will be, but a lot of the times it will also much more be so about the market commodity side of things. And so that is the kind of context of what took her so long to get published.
Yeah.
So then, yes, she got picked up, but it was also around that time when they were potentially looking at changing in the market anyway. And then it took off in the way that it did, I think, because it kind of coincided a bit with the dot-com bubble, with cinema kind of becoming like that turn of the century, turn of the millennium shift in cinema. Like we had Lord of the Rings was big, and so fantasy became quite big. And then, the dot-com bubble and fan fiction websites taking off, and, the internet.
Yeah.
There was just like a whole storm of things that coincided to contribute to that greater. There was going to be something that was going to become a cultural phenomenon, and it happened
and it was
to be Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And this is not to discount any hard work that she had done, any hard work that her teams had done around that time, or to discount, how famous it was, because it was very famous.
It continues to be.
And everyone likes that kind of story. I mean, you look at Lord of the Rings, you look at Star Wars, you look at Harry Potter, you can see people love that type of story.
It's the underdog.
Yes.
It's the kid that no one thought would succeed, ends up being really special.
So yes, it was an absolute phenomenon. And I really do think it was kind of the growth of social media was right in the middle of when the Harry Potter books were coming out as well. Just blogging, all of those things. Like everything was right in the middle of just like this burst of new things that all contributed to what became the Harry Potter phenomenon, and JK rose up with that. And like I made a note somewhere, I think it was the New York Times bestseller.
Oh, they started the New York Times children's bestseller list because of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
The children's bestseller list didn't exist before that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is wild to think about, really.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely wild. Absolutely. Because it's just such a big part, like the New York Times bestseller list is just such a big part of like all genres now. Like
yeah. So to think that as such a massive section didn't exist is, crazy.
So all of this to say, her story as an author, the story of the rise of Harry Potter and her fight to bring this story to life, and that the publisher finally took her on board and then, was proved right to take on the underdog after so long, to then make Harry Potter the absolute success, and then for everyone to then try and imitate it or try and do these things, it became her kind of publicity suit of armor, almost like this impenetrable. She was Hermione, she was Harry Potter, she was the underdog that overcame the machine of publishing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that is kind of what she was known as around all of this. And then, you know, on the surface, Harry Potter is meant to be, I guess, kind of an allegory for the fight against Nazi Germany and all of those things. And so on the surface, it is, you know, light against evil and all of those things. And that is what we're kind of, I guess, trying to penetrate when then her problems do come to light and continue to come to light. And then, you know, you have the power of Universal Studios behind it now as well with the movies and people's love of the original trio from the movies.
The movies and the theme parks and all of the things, because it's not just movies anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just become a whole cultural phenomenon of itself. And so I guess like this is just kind of us being like, we understand people's reluctance to let it go. And this is also kind of why we're beginning with JK as well, because she's also, I guess, kind of like, if you look at 2018, the timing of when she started to kind of slide down that slippery slope. It is also timing with that kind of cultural phenomenon of people in general starting to hold celebrities to account. It's very much in timing with when the Me Too movement started to really gain traction, and that became really big, and looking for celebrities to be held accountable for their actions and for their opinions and things when they choose to air them publicly. That she kind of also once again found herself in the middle of another big cultural shift.
Yeah.
And so that's why we've kind of chosen to begin this series with her. And so I guess this kind of brings us naturally to chapter 2, which is the beginning of the problematic revolution, the problematic reveal.
Yeah.
So it started in 2018 when she liked a tweet, and it always starts on Twitter. It always starts on Twitter. She liked a tweet about trans women just being men in dresses. And then when people got upset about that, and she got her PR team to call it a middle-aged moment.
Yeah, so she actually had like an active response to this when there was a bit of backlash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily an apology, but it was kind of like I'm middle-aged, I didn't realize people can see what I like. But then in 2019, things really heated up because there was a lady named Maya Forstater who was fired from, I believe it was the BBC, for saying that what's the word?
You're paraphrasing.
I'm paraphrasing, yeah. Basically, the last part is going to be a direct quote, but leading up to the direct quote. So basically, accepting trans women or calling trans women women or being forced to be around trans women and accept them as women is like forcing Jewish people.
Specifically in bathrooms, I think was her problem.
Specifically in bathrooms, I think, was the problem. Is like forcing Jewish people to eat pork, is what Maya said. And then Rowling responded.
I don't know if it was a response, but it was
It wasn't a response, it was like a tweet of support.
Yes, agreed.
It was a tweet of support, basically saying, wear whatever you want, call yourself whatever you want.
And it was very passive-aggressive.
Yeah, and then ended the tweet with, I stand with Maya. Because then Maya was fired and then brought claim against her previous employer for wrongful dismissal.
Which she later won, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so that is where it all began. And then since this time, Rowling has really just made everything about her fight against trans women, to be honest. And so after that kind of uproar around her support of Maya's comments in 2018, or 2019, sorry, there was obviously quite a bit of backlash, and it seems to have made her feel like she needed to explain herself. And so then on the 10th of June 2020, she published an open letter where she explained her reasoning. And so we're not going to read the whole thing because a quick Google search will allow you to find it. We can link it down the bottom as well.
It's also long.
It's also very long, but we actually have a book that we're reading it out of that I highly recommend. It's written by Judith Butler and it's called Who's Afraid of Gender? And I think if you are someone who is wondering about why you should care about this issue in particular, like why should you care about people who hate trans people, why should you care about the gender debate, then I think that this is a very good book for you to read because it does show the greater ripple effects and the greater issues at hand, like the symptom that hating this small group of people is a sign of a bigger issue in society and how it's all linked. And it does it in a way that is not overly academic. It's very easy to digest, and there's lots of clear examples. There's lots of links between all of the different things across the globe, like not just American based, not just in the UK, but like globally. We can see these things happening. So it's a very good read, and Judith Butler is amazing. And I would just like to say, before we jump into reading some of these snippets of JK's open letter, that it does mention domestic violence and sexual assault. So if you did want to skip ahead, we'll also put those timestamps in the show notes if you don't want to listen to this part. So basically, I think what this open letter shows you is the cognitive dissonance and the inability to really think logically about this issue with not just JK herself, but people who call themselves gender critical feminists, or like we would know them as TERFs, trans exclusionary feminists, radical feminists. But she starts with her personal experience and then expands out from there. And Judith breaks it down quite well in the book. So I'm reading directly from the book at the moment, and we will kind of discuss, I guess, with Judith, with her breakdown as well. So I'll start with JK's words now. She says, I managed to escape my first violent marriage with some difficulty, but I'm now married to a truly good and principled man, safe and secure in ways I never in a million years expected to be. However, the scars left by violence and sexual assault don't disappear, no matter how loved you are and no matter how much money you've made. My perennial jumpiness is a family joke, and even I know it's funny. But I pray my daughters never have the same reasons I do for hating sudden loud noises or finding people behind me when I haven't heard them approaching. And next up, she says that she has empathy for trans women, and that there's even potential for solidarity. And she says, if you could come inside my head and understand what I feel when I read about a trans woman dying at the hands of a violent man, you'd find solidarity and kinship. I have a visceral sense of the terror in which these trans women will have spent their last seconds on Earth, because I too have known moments of blind fear when I realized that the only thing keeping me alive was the shaky self-restraint of my attacker. I believe the majority of trans-identified people do not only pose zero threat to others, but are vulnerable for all the reasons I've outlined. Trans people need and deserve protection. Like women, they're most likely to be killed by sexual partners. Trans women who work in the sex industry, particularly trans women of colour, are at particular risk. Like every other domestic abuse and sexual assault survivor I know, I feel nothing but empathy and solidarity with trans women who've been abused by men.
If we were reading that in isolation,
yeah,
you would go, oh, everything else, she sounds like she's a real supporter.
Yeah, and because if we remember that this all started with her being in support of Maya Forstater, whose biggest issue was having to share bathrooms with trans women, and this has continued to be a big thing for JK in particular, and in the greater kind of argument around transness is
a lot of stuff from the vote that she funded. A lot of it was about that, like safe spaces for women and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very much about the bathroom issue, which just...
So we would prefer to have a trans man in the women's bathroom.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And it's actually interesting that you just said that, because I'm going to read a little bit of what Judith has said about this in response now. So it says, the professed feelings of empathy and solidarity are based on a questionable analogy. Men are violent. Trans women in particular are at high risk of being killed by these domestic partners. It would seem that the violence she is concerned about is domestic violence perpetrated by men. But what about other forms of social violence inflicted against trans people more broadly? The domestic scene of violence circumstances the treatment of violence in these paragraphs. What about incarceration, psychiatric pathologization, street violence, loss of employment? Are men the problem, or is it the social organization of patriarchy and masculine domination? Would not men be different outside such orders? Aren't new generations of men showing significant signs of change? Are gay men even included in this category, or are they not thinkable inside the category? What about genderqueer men, or all those who define themselves as transmasculine, transgender men? She just doesn't talk about that.
Yeah. Well, because they're not relevant to her argument.
Exactly. And so then she continues that the solidarity that she's just announced disappears when trans women turn out to not be women at all, but they turn out, in her view, to be men, which allies them with the attackers rather than the victims. So she says, I want trans women to be safe. At the same time, I do not want to make and this grosses me out, I do not want to make natal girls and women less safe. When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, and as I've said, gender confirmation certificates may now be granted without any need for surgery or hormones, then you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside. That is the simple truth. So she wants trans women to be safe, but like, does the safety of what she calls natal girls and women come at the expense of keeping these trans women safe, who she has already said she acknowledges are at a higher risk of violence perpetrated by men? So are they women or are they men? Like, there's no logic there.
I mean, the second part seems to kind of out her from the first. Like, she has said, I want them to be safe, but then is like, I don't see them as women.
Yeah.
It's going back to her comment that she liked about men in dresses. They're men in dresses. That's what she thinks.
Yeah.
Her middle-aged, I nearly called it menopausal, her middle-aged moment was really like, that's what she believes. But it does, and this is where this argument confuses me a little bit, especially from that point of view of, we want biological, I'm using, but you want biological women to be safe in spaces that are supposed to be safe for them, bathrooms, change rooms, etc. And you're saying that trans women don't belong there, but you're not thinking of them as women. You think that they're unsafe because you still think they're a man. You're not scared of trans women, you're scared of men. Like, that feels like what it always comes back to for me.
And also, she's conflating domestic violence with violence perpetrated in public or in public spaces.
They're very different.
They're very different.
And if she wants that trans woman to go into a men's bathroom, they're far more likely to be a victim of violence in that setting.
Yeah, and like, she's shown that she's aware of the statistics that,
yes,
like the violence that trans women face.
Yes.
So she really actually doesn't care about the safety of them at all.
No.
Anyway, that is what we wanted to read out of her letter. It's a very long letter and you can read the whole thing if you like. But this is kind of the beginning of her war against trans women.
Yeah.
And like, as we've seen, there's one of the videos that we've linked, there's a very good clip from a news snippet in the UK where someone is explaining to a UK politician that based on biological, that trans men who very much appear to be men will need to be using the women's bathroom, and it doesn't compute in his head.
No, he literally has a brain fart.
And it's like, we shouldn't laugh, but it's just like they can't. Anyway, it's just so frustrating.
Well, it's so, like, what's the word? With the horses? Like, they've got blinders on?
Yeah, they've got blinkers on. Yeah, yeah.
Like, you're only seeing this one thing, which again is like a fraction, like a tiny fraction of the population.
Yeah.
You're making this big thing about them and you're failing to see all of the other consequences of this one thing that you've done.
Yeah. Yeah. So really, that is why she's problematic. So I think really we can kind of then move from this into chapter 3.
Before we quickly move into chapter 3 though, it has escalated since then. Since that letter, it has escalated sharply.
But I think that really what it's escalated to is kind of part of the consequences though, because it's what she does with her money, which is what she gets from people's ongoing support. So...
Oh, that's true. Yeah. True. Yes.
So if we look at chapter 3, which is the consequences of continuing to support her. So she released that letter confirming her heinous beliefs in June 2020. She has continued to dig down despite backlash, despite everything. And if we just look at, as Erin was kind of just saying before we moved into chapter 3, that things have escalated since then. She has used her money. We've talked about the law that was recently just passed in the UK, but she contributed £70,000 directly towards the appeal with that law of her own money. But to just put that in perspective of how little of her money that actually is, since 2020, she has earned $80 million per year. And as of 2025, she is worth $1.2 billion. And in 2025, she has just also signed this big deal with Warner Brothers or Universal, is it, to make this new Harry Potter TV series.
Oh, this series, yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that she is continuing to make this much money and also still continuing to get big deals like this in Hollywood, despite being as problematic as she clearly is, when you look at other people in the industry who have also shared problematic opinions and have then pretty much ceased to be in the public eye.
Well, yes, often they kind of go away and then they come back, whereas she's quite steadily just really carried on.
She has not needed to do that. She has just continued. And that is why we started with the legend and the kind of pillar of what Harry Potter and JK is, because we wanted to not give an excuse, but just kind of give context of what formed Harry Potter, so that then perhaps if you have been caught up in that, then this breakdown of what has actually happened could help you to then see why perhaps some of this has not penetrated that, and why you might not be aware.
As well as the funding of the vote, or the appeal for that vote in the UK, she also started the foundation in May.
Yes. So in April, the new law was passed.
Yep.
And then in May 2025, she started the Legal Funding for Women's Sex-Based Rights Foundation, which is directly funded by her, all her own money, to fund cases about
and against trans women. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's trying to erase trans people from public life, essentially. She doesn't want, especially trans women, to exist.
Us making the point of she's funding this with her own money is, if you are buying a video game or a book or some merch or going to see a play or watching Harry Potter on TV or streaming or whatever, that's your money. You've let her do that.
Yeah.
Or you've not let her do that, but like you've given her that money.
You're contributing to that.
And this is like, not trying to make anyone feel bad, we've all given her money. Let's be real.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I was a huge Harry Potter fan. Granted, I picked up the third book in 2003. Not sure why I started with the third book, but there you are. And I loved it. I loved the magic and the world and all of the things. I didn't read it with that critical eye that other people did and notice all of the things she had put in there unintentionally or intentionally.
Yeah.
I loved the movies. Like, they were my comfort movies for a really long time. And so...
Yeah. And I mean, that's something we haven't touched on in this episode, is we have not gone into the problematic things in the books themselves about her attitude towards Jews, her attitude about Black people. Like, there's so many videos.
Well, there's so much about that, though. I don't think we need to. Yeah, that's not.
There's so much about it. Like, that's why we didn't go into that, because our purpose for this series about the problematic authors, about the separating the art from the artist, is specifically about why you can't separate the art from the artist, and why we need to put our money where our mouth is. It's not about telling people what they can and can't read. It's not about telling people that they can't have nostalgia. It's not about telling people that they should have known better before anybody knew better.
No, of course not. Like, if I were to still be reading the books and watching the movies or whatever in my private space, then that's my business.
Yeah. Like, if you already own things and you're not continuing to put money into them, you don't need to get rid of them. Like, you don't need to...
You can if you want, but you don't...
Yeah, like if...
You don't need to feel like you have to. No.
No.
It's about that sort of giving her more oxygen. And if you're watching them or advertising them, or, you know, if you're an Instagram or whoever, TikTok, and you've got the books in the background, or you've still got your house in your bio, it's all of those things that kind of say, oh, I'm fine with her.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
I think it's okay. And I've seen a lot of people say, I value my nostalgia over trans lives.
Yeah.
Which, when you frame it like that, doesn't sound great.
No. And I think a lot of people, they then start to wade into the fan fiction space of that. And I would say that is a whole different thing.
And that is a whole nother podcast.
And a whole nother podcast. And I would just say, I think there is also some links in the blog about some really critical arguments around that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we are planning on doing a podcast about fan fiction and things like that, because I think that there is a lot of power to be taken back in fan fiction, especially around things like this. But I would also say that there's no money in fan fiction.
Well,
at least there never used to be.
Correct. Yeah. There's not supposed to be money in fan fiction.
There's not supposed to be money in fan fiction, but that is another issue that we can talk about another day. But this is specifically about the consequences of supporting J.K. Rowling, and this is the consequences, is continuing to support, is contributing to that $1.2 billion that she is putting directly into making life harder for less than 1% of the population, when she could be using that money to make life better for women who are actually suffering from domestic violence, who are actually struggling and homeless and things like that, which from everything that
I think she was doing at a point, but is maybe not anymore.
She was doing at a point, but I think she's become quite angry. She's part of a group the FWS, but I can't remember what it stands for
Oh,
anymore.
yeah.
But it was created specifically
For that vote.
yeah, for the vote and to stand against trans women. They don't actually rally or protest or do anything else except protest transness.
They don't do anything for women's rights.
No. And in 2021, she called the women of that organisation her sisters.
Yeah.
So really, I think since this has become her big thing, I don't think she has been doing as much as what she maybe used to for these other causes that she used to care about. So
For Women's Scotland, it's called, just in case anyone was wondering. Yeah.
For Women's Scotland, that's right, yeah. So for people who are like, well, she's already got her billions, you know, what difference does it make? The thing is, if we all stop giving her money, she can run out of money, because the way that she makes money is from Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Majority of her income comes from places like Universal Studios. It comes from the video game. That was the top selling video game of that year, despite, you know, the big calls for people to boycott it. It comes from people continuing to support the cultural extension of Harry Potter.
Yeah. So to put it in like another sort of example of people knowing where their line in the sand is, I guess, lots of Taylor Swift fans until recently were not listening to Reputation or Debut because Taylor didn't own those. And that's why she was re-recording them all under Taylor's version, so that she owned the masters, because the masters were sold out from underneath her. And lots of Taylor's fans would not have listened to those in years, because they knew that every time they streamed a song or whatever, they were giving money to the people who took her masters away. So you understand for her, like you understand what that meant for Taylor to not be giving money to someone else because you wanted it to be going to the right place. But you can't do the same thing when it's harming trans people.
Yeah.
People know where the line is. Like, you don't want to support other problematic people who I'm sure we'll get to in other episodes, but there's just something about this one that really trips people up.
Yeah. And so that's why we started with it, because one, it's been around the longest. It's the one people seem to hold on to the hardest. And I also just think we have done a lot of episodes in defense of women, and we're very staunch feminists ourselves. And so we're always talking about how women aren't being taken seriously in publishing and things like that. And so I think that this is also an example of people not being willing to hold a pioneering woman in the publishing industry to account for her actions.
Because it feels anti-feminist.
Yes, because it feels anti-feminist. But I would also just say that I think J.K. Rowling is a very good example of the damage that white women can do to causes.
Yeah.
When they use their power for evil.
Said as a white woman with another white woman.
Yes.
Said as two white women. Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, I really think that that's all we kind of have to say, is that the consequence, really, what it comes down to is if you're continuing to purchase new Harry Potter things or other, whatever, her Robert what's-her-face things.
Well, that's the other thing, because yes, she is getting the majority of her money from, I think when we were looking at it, it was the bulk of her earnings actually come from the Harry Potter world at Universal Studios, wherever that is. But yeah, she still gets money from all of the Robert Galbraith books.
Yeah.
Like those books, whatever the series is called, has been made into a TV show.
Yeah, and they're making another TV show from it recently as well.
And by buying those books also, they're maybe not as visible as the Harry Potter ones, but certainly you're still funding her.
Yeah.
And you're not alone in funding her. Obviously.
No.
Lots of people are doing it, but I continue to be speechless about this stuff.
Like, it's pure hatred is what she's funding. And there are so many better ways to use your money.
Yeah. And it just, you either feel like everyone deserves human rights or you don't. Like, I think that's kind of what it comes down to. And then if you are publicly supporting her, then you are saying that you agree with her and you don't think that trans people are people. You don't think they deserve the same rights as everyone else.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that that's what your money is doing, it is. Because she can continue to make that kind of money every year because everyone's like, oh, it doesn't affect me, or my money won't make a difference. My buying that one book or that one box set or going to that one movie, like that is a drop in the pond. And you're right, it is a drop in the pond. But if everyone took away their drop in the pond would get smaller.
Yeah.
It's very easy to think that it doesn't affect us, like you can't make a difference.
We need to remember that we have power as consumers. Like, I think a lot of the effort over the last, couple of decades has been to make us forget that we can have power with where we choose to put our money. Like, we don't just have to buy what they tell us to buy. Even in a cost of living crisis, there are other options.
Yeah.
And again, that's another podcast. But again, I just want to reiterate, if you already own things, there's nothing stopping you from continuing to enjoy them and tapping into that nostalgia if you're able to. Like, for me, I don't know if I'm able to, but
I'm not able to anymore.
I was never as big of a Harry Potter fan. I was like you, I read them as an adult. I didn't read them as a kid. So I didn't have that same connection with them. But people who did have that connection with them, there are ways to enjoy them where you're still not contributing to growing her fame or making other people feel good about it. You can do whatever you want privately.
Yeah.
But just think about where your money is going and what you're contributing to. And yeah, I can't remember who the next author is in this series. We're not going to make, every second episode one of these episodes because they are quite heavy, but we just wanted to start to dig into some media topics, meteor with a T, sorry, my mumbly Australian accent, topics in these episodes because, yeah, the publishing and books are really important, and critical thinking and critical reading of them and critical examination of the people who create them is important as well.
Yeah, agreed.
So, yeah, thank you so much if you're still here at the end of this episode. It's probably going to be quite a long one. But yeah, we're really interested to hear your thoughts, and if you've got any authors that you'd like us to have a look into,
Oh, yeah.
definitely send them through.
Definitely.
Because that would be interesting, because we've got a little bit of a running list. We don't know when we're going to make them, but it's just kind of as we get to them. But yeah, we will catch you guys in the next episode.
Next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Snailed It podcast with Danikka and Erin, brought to you by Author's Own Publishing, the home of indie publishing. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and follow us on Instagram at Author's Own Publishing. Music brought to you by Mikkel, with more details in the show notes.